On behalf of B&K, I would welcome all of you all to this ideation series session. We have with us Mr. Anuj Poddar, MD and CEO of Bajaj Electricals. Welcome, Anuj, to this session, and thank you so much for giving your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanjeev, and thank you for having me. And thank you to everyone who's joined in.
And we also have our sector head, Kunal, here. And the way we'll do this, Anuj, is I'll ask some of the macro and strategy questions. Kunal will have probably a few questions as well. And then if there are any questions from any participants, they can put it on a chat and we can ask those questions at some point of time if we have time.
Sure.
Okay, great. So Anuj, maybe just to start off your personal journey, I think you were an independent director in 2016, if I'm not wrong, and then you became in an executive position, maybe I think 2019, right? Is that right? And then of course now you are MD CEO of the company. So maybe you can just tell us a bit about this journey. What has how looking back, and especially last 3 years, the market cap of the company has gone up 4x. So you must be quite pleased with that. So maybe you can just tell us a bit about your journey and how's gone.
Sure. Thank you, Sanjeev, and good afternoon once again to everyone. I started, like you said, as an independent director on the board of Bajaj Electricals. That is 2016 to about 2018, about 2.5 years. Quite frankly, as we all understand, the independent director position is completely different from this executive hands-on position, right? I mean, there is fiduciary responsibilities that you conduct as a director, as an audit committee, etc. And this was the only company that had chosen to be on the board for reasons of governance and ethics, etc., which I was comfortable being an independent director, given all the liabilities that position carries, right? But that's in a way far removed from the operational aspects of the business. When you meet 5 times a year or so be it, right? It's a very different thing. With the unfortunate demise of Anant, son of Shekhar Bajaj, that's when this conversation started. And it was not a knee-jerk reaction either from their side or from my side. It was a period of 3 to 4 months of multiple discussions with multiple different members of the promoter family and myself on, from their side, whether I was fit to take on this position, and from my side, whether this is something I aspire to do. What I want to connect the dot to is that the single point, I mean, obviously there are many considerations, but the single point or purpose of me signing on for my attraction was that I think this company is a great company in many which ways, but was punching way below its weight. So I think the opportunity or unlocked potential sitting this company is so much more manifold, more than what it was actually where it was sitting at that point of time. So that was really, as a professional, the calling that I had in terms of taking on this opportunity, that if I can come and play a role in helping unlock that opportunity or that potential that sits there, then that would be a great journey. Cut to now, as you said, it's been it's close to about 4 years. It seems like a long time ago if I reflect on all that we've done, but it was not a pleasant start, if I may use that word, in the sense that I had walked into a crisis situation. It was fires all around, and more than I actually realized from the outside. So it was clearly not something I was fully prepared for. I was prepared for something else. I was prepared on the brand side, on some other facets, product, and probably we'll talk about some of these things, but not the depth of existential issues that we're facing at that point of time. So cut to present times, I think I can only look back with satisfaction and sense of achievement on behalf of the whole team, that we've come through very difficult times and we've come through well, and it's taken a lot of hard work to bring us there. And there could have been many things that could have gone wrong along the way. Not everything that you try to do or execute things happen the way you want, but nothing could be worse than the pandemic. At that point, we didn't expect that 2 of the years, or now almost 3 years, would be pandemic affected. So in that sense, I think we've managed to navigate through. We've come on the other side. We've come across looking good, which is good. I'll just end by saying that's the good part, right? Or maybe I'll leave that for a later thing. I do have some comments to offer, but let you ask more, and I want to come back with a point on this.
Right. So you made a point about the existential part, and I guess COVID was obviously very tough. But other than COVID, within the company, what was and you also made a point that punching below the weight that the company had. Bajaj obviously is a fabulously strong brand in India, and so on. So given that context, what do you think were the easy ones? I know now it's always difficult to get the last bit right, but what was those easy things that you kind of changed, which is where you when you look back.
So, I would say, Sanjeev, to be honest, there was nothing easy. And when we have so many issues, firstly, just the quantum of issues makes everything difficult. But really, nothing was easy. But I would say there were many things that were obvious and that were not in place, right? I mean, it was staring in the face that this cannot continue this way and this has to change. That's everything. The business model was broken. Our reliance on EPC, it was two-thirds of our business was EPC, one-third was consumer. It was obviously not sustainable. Our project management was absolutely zero. Our risk management was very weak. Our controls and processes were weak. Our, talent pool was, I would say, mediocre, to be honest. It was in some ways, all the external problems that we had, a broken balance sheet, negative cash flow, high debt, broken business model, suboptimal margins, were manifestations of a broken system internally. So this is an outcome of the inside. The inside was a broken. I'm not trying to exaggerate, but it was difficult on many fronts. So when I say it was not easy, but it was obvious that you needed to fix a lot of these things. You needed to fix the workplace culture, the talent pool, the systems, processes, and there's no shortcut to some of these things, project management, etc. And just get the metrics right, get the, I would say performance management systems in place, have your dashboards in place. You have to track cash, you have to be, and you're a Marwari company, if not a professional company. The one thing Marwari is known for Parta system and for cash flow, right? Punji पे, वो क्या बोलते हैं, बही खाते पे, बल्ले पे जो भी है, they sit and monitor cash if nothing else. We don't monitor accounting standards. So, you simply had to get those core first principles right. So I think it was obvious that all of these things had to be put in place. And there was a lot more to that. There's an ERP that we put in place this year, etc. But unless you're going to put the basic first principles in place, all the esoteric, future brand strategy products, which we yet have are doing a lot of, but that had no foundation to be built on, etc. So it's doing all that hard work, doing the obvious, and then building it on with all the stuff you yet have to do as a contemporary company.
Right. Fair point. Well, looking at your background, you're not a consumer durable person in the past, right? In that sense, you've worked for media companies and you've done this. Of course, it needs a whole team to do what you are kind of suggesting and doing it. Do you think your whole team is now fully in place to be able to execute going forward?
Yes and no. Firstly, yes, I think, as a leader, there's very little you can achieve. It's the team that achieves. All you have to show, I think, is the direction, the vision, be the decision maker, but you're not the executor by far. And even on, direction, etc., some of that has to be collective, brainstorming, etc., while the onus sits on you to make the final call, right? So it is, everything that we've done, I keep saying that every time, it's because of team effort. That said, I think being an outsider sometimes is helpful. I was an outsider on every yardstick, right? Outsider to the company, outsider to the industry, outsider to manufacturing. I've never dealt with most of these things, EPC, engineering, etc. None of those things. But what that does is it helps you not get lost in the technicalities of that. It's coming back to the obvious, business hota hai, dhanda hota hai. The first principles of that are same. Common sense is the same, right? It's not common actually. So if you can take the business back to the one thing I am as a CA, I understand numbers, I understand finances. And the other thing that has held me in good stead is my consulting background. In terms of, you advise multiple companies and therefore understand different organizations and how to create value in those things. So you can bring all of those learnings to play, the first principles, the basic common sense, the financial metrics, then the discipline really to speak. And then, weigh heavy on your teams in terms of, pooling together all the resources at your command. That's really the job of a leader, I would say. Somewhere, I think, at the top, in a converse way, it becomes simpler. At the top, you have to be a general manager. You're not going to be the guy who's got to be a transmission tower specialist or design systems specialist. Different dimensions of that. In a way, that's the call, and it's not easy, but it's yet something that one learns to navigate through. And I think the last point I'll make on that is there's an innate business commercial acumen or sense that you have to bring to business. maybe I'll give that to my Marwadi roots or whatever it is. But I think that part is not, I think, you cannot have some skills at the top, but that part you must have, no matter which
Yeah,
domain you come from. If you
right,
don't have basic business value creation, understanding, you'll not be able to create value for others.
right. Fair point. So, looking at your, I think the last annual report where you guys started talking about transformation journey in more detail, and you also have this Horizon 2 plan that's kind of coming up. Maybe you can talk a bit about that. What are you, of course, you guys have spoken about it in various forum, but slightly more granular in terms of what are you thinking over next 5 years? Where do you see this company going?
Sure. And it's the first time we put this deck out because as a, what should I say, it may be a slightly personal trait or a company trait also that we want to embody is we want to be understated, talk less and do more. Okay.
Mhm.
So by nature, you'll not see us put out over communication. We are happy to do these meetings and we are very, very on the one hand, very transparent and open and very frank in our communication, but at the same time, not put out very flashy, flamboyant, big ticket numbers to kind of garner attention. Yeah. But we put this out because I think it was necessary for more players to understand at least a narrative and where we are coming from and where we're going. The second point I have to make is that the reason to put this out now is because we do clearly have a long-term view on what we're trying to create here. Okay. And I call that the decade of Bajaj Electricals. It's a 10-year view that, 2020 to 2030, we want to create something special out here. And when I say decade, I also put this in the context of we've had missed decades. If we look at the last couple of decades, one can almost, classify them. Somebody told me those are the missed decades of Bajaj Electricals. In 2000 to 2010 or 2010 to 20, had we done everything right, we might have been a very different position or company right now. So how do we make sure we do everything right in these 10 years, 2020 to 2030? But that cut to, we've in our heads broken that into three horizons, 1, 2, and 3, because we have to have interim milestones. Horizon 1, which the first 3 years, right till 22, end of this year, etc., was to fix all the past issues, okay? All these legacy issues, balance sheet, cash flow, business model, the demerger that will kind of culminate this, mark the end of this Horizon 1. That will be two clean, separate companies for investors. And more importantly, from an organization perspective internally, that we have separate risk reward, separate org culture, separate team, separate talent pools to chase very different business models, etc. And I think that really sets the platform for us to what we call Horizon 2, that from here on, the issues are behind us. We want to now focus on operational excellence and growth, and I'll come back to that. I want to pause here to just reflect on these 3 years, because when we started this journey 3 years out,
Yeah.
the story we're putting out now is no different from what we had in our mind back then. And when we took that to the street and, met various investors, and this was around July 2019, okay, when we're trying to do a QIP. I was met with huge resistance, huge skepticism, almost to the point of, I wouldn't say animosity, but, you guys haven't done it, you can't do it. And, you're saying all the right things, but it ain't going to happen. Okay. A little bit of, I think, in that, I didn't see negativity. I found a sense of frustration in that body language too. Everybody, in a way, was saying that your Bajaj Electricals can and should be doing so much better. That same thing about punching above its weight, but you were punching below your weight, and that I would treat that as well-wishers who wanted to do better, but were kind of frustrated with not doing better. Cut to where I see now, there's a huge conversion, right? You alluded to market cap growth. Our QIP failed at 500, our QIP failed at 400, by the way, at rupees at the share price. We finally did a rights issue at 310. And cut to now, suddenly the price has moved, the price as a metaphor for that the street is now buying into what we've done and seeing that movement and seeing that transformation journey play out. Only point I have there is that sometimes now I see success, takes people far away. We want to remain grounded. My view is we are yet starting out. So we don't want to be at a point where we think we've done it all, we've shown everybody what we're capable of, and let that go up to a point of arrogance, etc., because we have a long journey ahead of us, right? And we will keep playing that from a long-term perspective. We're not here to deliver overnight success. It takes a long time to actually build that. So I just wanted to contextualize that. Coming to Horizon 2 again, it's really about that the issues behind us. There's two words, in the slide I put out a lot of words, but there's two words to my mind. One is growth, and the second is excellence. And growth will come on the back of excellence. So how can we create an organization driven by excellence? How can we build and institutionalize operational excellence across every function, every facet of a business? In that, again, there's no shortcut, but you have to do that the right way, put all those building blocks in place. I can look at many companies, maybe on a talk about now, later, Bajaj Auto, etc. I'm very also, I have a very close relationship with Rajiv Bajaj, etc. Because I think we talk the same language in many ways. There is no shortcut to doing these things. We better do it right. And, people will pick it up and then, if not long run, even in medium term, we'll come out winners in that. Yeah. So I'll just park at that, but that's the next 3 years in my horizon. And then there's another further Horizon 3 in my mind, but
Sure.
that's what we're shooting for.
But in terms, when you say growth and excellence, as investors, we always look at numbers of some kind. And, is there some metric in mind that you have? How would you define excellence in a number? Like, is it a ROE, ROCE goal? Or, I know it's, even if it's some ballpark thought you can, share with us, that'll be great.
So I'll try and answer that in 2-3 ways. Firstly, since all of you are always hungry for numbers and I talk numbers, because that's not how we run the business. We run the business in terms of do the right thing, the numbers will follow. And that's happened in the past too. That said, because there has to be something that you have a directional sense, I'll give you 2-3 markers. One is we have put out in the deck a target of 7,500 crores for the residual Bajaj Electricals business, which by calendar year 25. Okay, so give or take 1 year here and there in terms of markets, environment, COVID, economy, that's fine. But at least that gives you a directional marker of what we're looking for in terms of scale of aspiration, number one. Number two, when we talk bottom line, we are very clear that we are at suboptimal on margins, and we will keep expanding our margins. My guidance always has been that 1 percentage point per annum, we will keep expanding that. The reason I say 1 percentage point and not overnight, because everything that we're doing, optimizing, we're reinvesting into the business to actually grow that, because we are chasing the long term. But I think for the coming, at least many years coming, that 1 percentage expansion should continue. So that ride should continue. We'll talk about when we think that will stop. Third marker really is, this is on the consumer part of the business. So it's similar to EPC. I think we kind of bottomed out. All these last couple of years was really about cleaning it up, holding back revenues, holding back bidding, low order book. From here on, the order book is growing, will continue to grow, and the EPC business will grow, but in a calibrated manner yet. Whether that's 1,000 crores, 1,500 crores of business, we'll see what that is. But that's kind of a broad range of what one should anticipate in that business, and with a positive EBIT, but with a cash flow control and working capital control. So these are some broad markers. But I want to step aside from numbers because these are just more external outcomes. I think on all of these things, when we talk about operational excellence, that margin aayega kahan se, growth aayegi kahan se. The metric for me is we will outgrow industry. We've done that last 2-3 years. So that is the task before each of our teams, to outgrow industry on growth and sales and therefore market share. And channel by channel, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's modern trade, whether it's general trade, etc., across product categories, we are gunning for that, etc. So it'll be an aggregation of all of this, and that's supported by the back end. I think a lot of work that we have next couple of years around us is on the sourcing, supply chain, manufacturing, etc., and products also, which will optimize us and release those margins and drive us to a more, I would say, a much better placed company going forward.
Right. Sure. So,
sorry, I didn't touch upon ROC. Do you want me to touch
Yeah.
on ROC? You asked about that. So ROC, of course, is the final metric, that all culminates into. If you look at our numbers now on a consolidated basis for the company, I think it's about 12-13% ROC. Okay, that's very low. But that's a function of the legacy debt that you had and this blend of EPC and consumer. If you start separating out EPC, and I'll come to that separately, then the residual consumer business ROC is already sitting at about 25%. Okay, it's just not visible because of the reporting.
Sure.
We will, I'm sure, if we do what we're aiming to do, that ROC of 25% should grow very, very handsomely, very strongly in the next 2-3 years. Okay, I don't want to put a number there, but trust me, it should be very healthy. EPC too should give healthy ROC, but not comparable to the consumer business.
Yeah. Fair. No, that's great. Thanks. So maybe I'll, you've touched upon a few things which I wanted to go a bit more granular on. But the first question I had is there something that you'll not do? So because this is, I think in your earnings call, for example, you talked about you won't get onto air conditioning or, refrigeration. But are there things like that? What you'll do? Let's come back to what are there some things that you'll not actually get into just for the sake of growth?
So let me first put out the points of principle on this, right? What we do or don't do has to come from a point of ideological principles.
Yeah.
We do want to be driven by focus, okay? So which means we don't want to be distracted for reasons of vanity or headlines or, just what's the latest, be a kid in a candy store, that what's the latest fad in town or looking, okay? So anything we do will be driven by lens or, decision will be made from a lens of focus that if we do it, we have to be the best or the top two or three in that. And, it has to yet give us growth. So I think today we are one of, despite my saying focus, we are one of the most widely present players across multiple categories, more than our immediate, peers are. So I think in that we have enough room and enough white spaces or sub segments that we are not occupying within the categories that we're present in to actually yet expand and therefore grow, or even geographically, etc. So I think as long as we have enough room to grow in our current categories with white spaces, I'm not talking just purely linear growth, etc. I think we don't need to be distracted or be desperate to be distracted. Okay. Uh, and B, I think there's always a little premium on focus because you can get better and deliver better margins, then spread yourself thin on market shares across many things. And I would rather focus more to that will again have to pass the filters of can we be can we excel in that and can we be leader in that and can it create incremental ROC or value creation for us? Otherwise, not for the sake of vanity.
Sure.
So that's the points of principle, and therefore, ACs, etc. It's just a race to the bottom, I would say, at least for the near future. Yeah.
Right. Sure. In terms of where do you, when you talked about white spaces, and one of the things I picked up from the annual report was about you talked about lighting as an area, consumer lighting especially as an area of that can be pretty fast growing. So are there certain areas like this where you are most excited about, and you think these are things that you can quickly kind of they're easier ones to do relatively. Again, nothing as you said is easy, but on a relative basis.
Absolutely. So I pick out both lighting and fans. Okay, these are categories we've been present in for years, but we've completely lost our market share in the last many years. We are laggards, and rather than therefore looking at other things, if we focus on energies and getting back our share and rank in leadership in this, that's an obvious one to do. Taking lighting, and therefore lighting, we started that journey in December 2019. We started that move from a professional lighting space because that was less crowded in terms of just the focus one can give to that. We were, I think, a number 5 player or something. We are now, what should I say, equal number 1 player with the other leader in that space on top line. It was a negative margin business for us. FY22 is broken even. This certainly a profitable business for us, and that's come on the back of product innovation, etc. A lot more work that we've done on that. Now we're extending that into consumer lighting space that we've recently announced in July the consolidation and creation of a lighting BU, which is full lighting, consolidating consumer and professional lighting. Therefore, creating a focus team to just focus on lighting. The consumer lighting was earlier merged with the larger consumer business, so that's segregated into this thing. So I think the next 1-2 years, you'll see a lot more thrust on the consumer lighting from our side. There again, we had lost our space. We were, I think, a number 7 player. We will hope to gain market share. If you look at our Q3 or Q4 of FY22 and even Q1 of this year, has shown decent growth. We may in the very near term have some lumpiness, but over the next 4 to 8 quarters, you'll see the traction on that business again on the back of all that we're doing internally. So that's an obvious space, and the other one is fans. I think fans also, we've been a number 4, number 5 player. There again, rather actually number 5 player. There again, we've been growing market share. I think the big white space within fans for us is we almost entirely focus on sub-economy ceiling fans.
That's right.
Economy, premium ceiling fans, TPW, etc. These are all large market segments that we are launching more products. We have been. In next couple of years, next 2 seasons, we'll continue to see that thrust from our side. Yeah. And I can go on with more examples, but that's an example of how there's a lot of catch up that we're looking at doing, and therefore we're going to focus energies on that. Yeah.
Sure. In fact, you talked about fan that you were in that mass segment, so to say, and so as a brand, as an overall Bajaj as a brand, where do you see this? Because if I look at today, it's still considered, at least from our point of view, slightly more rural, slightly more massy brand. That's kind of how at least most of us as analysts look at it. If I were to look again to take your horizon and say that, okay, next 3 years, where do you want it to be? What do you want Bajaj as a brand to signify? What would you, how would you look at it?
So, the Bajaj brand is a funny oxymoron that we have. Okay, when I say that, it's our greatest strength, and yet the one that we are, doing nothing with, and greatest weakness. Okay, when I say greatest strength, you can't have a better brand than Bajaj to, start with or have to play with, in your hands, right? It's
Yeah.
got all the trust, legacy, awareness, just respect, halo, etc. around that, right? But I say weakness because we haven't positioned it sharply, we haven't upgraded it, we've allowed it to flounder into being seen as this. You use the word rural, how some people say sasta sundar tikau, value for money. It can be a far more aspirational, far more contemporary, far more relevant, far more innovative brand, etc. Carry all of those attributes. So the journey we're on is taking that great asset, Bajaj brand, but shedding it of all of these weaknesses and repositioning into all of these things. We'll see a much more sharper position brand. And these are not just general statements, so it has to come on the back of what we're doing last, year and a half. We've been working on brand architecture. When I say brand architecture for each of our individual brands, and we are, by the way, three-brand company: Bajaj, Morphy, Richards,
That's
and
right.
right? So we are defining by brand architecture means a clear brand proposition, brand framework, identity, positioning, tagline, etc. for each of these three brands individually, and then collectively as a company what they will stand for and how they will add up to more than the sum of parts. And you'll see that very soon play out in terms of starting with Bajaj brand, etc. How we're repositioning that, etc. So in terms of communication, and that will extend itself into products, etc. that we do. So that's really, the brand clearly, like I said, that was where it was punching below its weight. It's got all the strengths. Now it just needs to be repositioned, served out in a very different way, and command its rightful place. To your question, where will it be 3 years out? It has to be a far more aspirational brand. It has to stand for something. I don't want to give away the positioning that we and you play with, etc. But the consumers, the trade, our teams, etc., all have to identify with what are the attributes of this Bajaj brand. What does it mean to the life of the consumer, and what do its products, signify, etc. And then occupy that place with confidence, with an aggression, rather than as a value for money player. Which doesn't mean we'll vacate mass space, because the volumes and scale in India comes from mass. But price is not what you'll play on. You'll play on a brand attribute, create pull, because we're in a push company mostly. We're not a pull company. So we will play on consumer pull, and then the price will yet be a positive, pleasant discovery for the consumer that, okay, we're getting this proposition. So brands have to play on proposition. Price has to be discovered.
Right. But generally, it's not that easy for a brand which is established, let's say, as a value for money brand, to then become aspirational. Uh, at least that's what I understand. Maybe I'm completely wrong on this.
So,
But
yeah.
yeah, how would you do this? You have sub brands, or let's say Morphy Richards is considered a slightly more aspirational in that sense. So
So I
would
think
you?
it can be done, but there's a science to doing that. There's hard work to do that. You have to go about methodology, in a very systematic way in doing that. When I say aspirational, it doesn't have to be premium. So you don't outprice yourself.
Right.
We were sitting at a certain price point. We will extend that offering, but you not vacate that. You can't go from here to here. So it's
Correct.
about you broaden that offering range, but you yet cover that scale. But can you be a more aspirational version of your own self, right? Take, let's say, automobiles. Okay, I use that example. All the German makers, BMW, Merck, Audi, etc. They are premium brands. They are far more, that thing. But that also makes them niche. Now you take an MG also. That's also a relatively premium, SUV, not as much as the German ones, right? Now you take Hyundai and Kia. They're by no nature, they're not premium brands. Okay, they are very mass market brands, and that's the reason for their success in India. Okay, but they get aspirational because their products, their communication, their styling, all of their proposition, positioning, and language of communication to the consumer is very contemporary, is very aspirational, so that it doesn't have to be in the league or price point of a, Volvo or any of those things, but it can yet be aspirational at its given price point. So aspiration can exist at any price point as long as you make the consumer believe that he's got a very cool contemporary product at that price point, as opposed to a dated sasta product. So that there's a psyche that you have to play on, and the products have to back that. Yeah. So brand and products will both work in tandem for what we're trying to deliver. And that's to everything, our aesthetics, our product design. And actually, if you look at our products today, look at our fans today, look at our water heaters today, look at our coolers today, we've got a best design award for coolers. Look at our water heaters. Go look at a display unit in the wall of water heaters in a any store, and you'll see they look very, very nice. And that's just a repositioning, but that takes time for the market or consumers to completely shift their opinion, and we have to consistently do that.
Right. Fair point. You also talked about channels. Are there any channels you think where currently you're underperforming, or and hence you can re-energize those channels? Because you're if I look at, again, I think you guys are pretty good at disclosing what kind of channels you're doing, and so your annual report is, there's a lot of data in each one of that. But
So if we look at our general trade, and if you look at our alternate channels, which is modern trade, e-commerce, etc. 3-4 years ago when we started out, or when I joined, I remember the numbers. General trade was about was always 70+%. Alternate was about 30%. In that, alternate was 30%, was a government business about 14-15%.
right.
Government is, because of various reasons, CST clamped down on imports, etc., down to about 9%, but that's been made good. The general trade is also down from 70% to about 66%. And the growth has come from e-commerce and modern trade, which is the progressive channels of the future. So firstly, that's the good news, that we're moving in the right direction of the channels of the future, the high growth channel, and we're gaining market share and overgrowing in that, number one. Number two, from our indexation point of view, while general trade overall is fine, our general trade weightage has been far more in tier 2, 3 or rural markets, etc. Urban and metro markets, our counter share and therefore market share in general trade has also been weak, and similar in the modern trade. So directionally, that's what we want to improve. So as you start, lifting up your brand, as you start lifting up your products, and as you start creating greater consumer pull, by default, your acceptance, stocking, counter share, market share across urban India, which means across urban India and metros in general trade, and in modern trade, is what we really want to drive in the next 2-3 years. E-commerce, I'm not calling out because that we've always been doing well. But we continue to do well on that. But the two big catch-up areas for us is general trade in urban, in metro geographies, and modern trade.
Right. And modern trade, as you said, is has been growing pretty well. And how are you kind of tackling that in terms of putting yourself more in front of, because again there's a fight for shelf space in most of these cases. So what are you doing about it?
So the good news is we are the Bajaj brand, right? I'm not a startup. I'm not a completely new brand. I'm not a new entrant. So I do think there's a fight for an entry. We do have a foot in the door already in most of these things. We have relationships with all of these people. But that said, we had very limited SKUs or limited product categories there. So all you have to do is keep mining that relationship. And as you want more space, more SKUs, more categories being displayed, you have to earn or deserve that, right? Because these are finally commercially minded people. So as your product story improves, as your brand push and therefore consumer pull improves, if you are confident and you can convey that or demonstrate that to them, they're happy to stock you. And we've seen that. Walk into Vijay sales today, and you'll see a rightful pride of place for Bajaj products across many categories. But we've had to earn that space, and we'll keep doing that. And I think that's a continuous dialogue that we're having in multiple, not just national chains, but even the regional formats, etc. But that's very core to us, because that visibility is also very important for us there from a consumer mindset. And I think some of that at some point will hit an inflection point where, rather than us having to push with these guys, as the pull becomes stronger and either some chain keeps it, other one doesn't keep it, or some general trade keeps it, other doesn't keep it, the consumer goes and walks in and asks for a Bajaj heater or Bajaj fan because they've seen that advert. It's their loss to not have us. So I think another 2-3 years, we will hit that inflection point where the push will become easier for us, even across these counters. But that's coming on the back of range. I'll go back to fans and lighting example. Lighting, with what face would I go and ask for space when I didn't have the products? Last 1 year and next 1 year, we are rolling out a lot more of the panels, battens, recessed, all of those things, fans, expanding our range, etc. So now when you have a range, they have a reason to stock you. Otherwise, they didn't. And now they don't stock you in 2-3 years, then consumer yet wants that because of pull that we create, then it'll be their loss. So somewhere that position of negotiation or dialogue with them will change.
Right. And e-commerce, which was, I guess, a lot of it was COVID driven to start with, has that growth kind of tapered off, or are you still seeing?
So I think some of these events or triggers are, act as triggers or catalysts for behavioral change, right? And I think
Yeah.
that is the absolute growth numbers that you saw in the COVID has again, come down a little bit for e-commerce, not just for us, but for industry. If we
Yeah.
talk to Amazon, Flipkart, etc. But by far, it is yet the fastest growing channel. So it grows faster than other channels, but not at the scale at which it grew in 21 or so. But I think that behavioral change, we're seeing that, where tier two, tier three towns, other geographies, different segments of, from an affluence economic strata population is buying more and more online.
Right.
That said, the one thing we're very clear, and we say that very clearly, we are channel agnostic. So, our job is not to bet on one channel versus the other or to be channel focused, or we don't tend to give any exclusivities, etc., except for some different models that we create. That, that's the consumer's choice, and that's a marketplace's choice as to which channel will grow faster. Our job is to be present as a brand and product range across all the channels here. So we are as much for trade for the small guy, for the big guy, for the medium guy. We are agnostic to that. That's the consumer's choice to make. Dharma or karma is to the consumer.
Right. Sure. But you said that you're channel agnostic, but overall, from a profitability perspective, are these channels kind of similar from your perspective, or like some, so you're trying to build something or invest in some channels area,
So
right?
they have different nuances. There was a perception that I also had before being in this part that e-commerce must be a higher margin because you don't have all the cost of distribution, you don't have the intermediary, you don't have feet on street. But I think there are different, expense heads that you have on e-commerce. There's a different way of selling and marketing, etc. So I think in the end, it kind of neutralizes, quite honestly, for us. And I say that in a reverse way also. When we price ourselves on par with, e-commerce and offline. We don't distinguish or we don't subsidize either channel for the other. And I'm also saying this because I know some of our trade friends listen to these things. If there are discounting, if there are price conflicts, that's not done by us here.
Right.
So we are fairly equitable to that. Then if some player chooses to indulge in, price discounting, they're dipping into their pockets to do that. But, we are trying to be fair to all our, trade or non-trade partners and also to consumer. And then, there are nuances to how the business models run. But today, for us, it's not differentially profitable one or the other.
Right. Sure. Coming to some numbers, last year you did 3,700 crores odd on the consumer pack, and you're saying 7,500 crores is like 3-4 years down the line, whatever the number. But I'm just trying to understand in terms of total addressable market for all your products put together, what's your estimate? I know it's not good data is available in general, but what would be your estimate on this?
So to be honest, I don't have that at the top of my head, Sanjeev, because we had so many categories. Like fans are 9,000 crore, but I have not done the aggregation for all of that.
Sure.
But just the way I approach it is, to me, that's not a problem statement because I fundamentally believe that we have a very good ride as a sector. Most of these categories, all the appliances, fans, even consumer lighting to a certain point, because I think you're past that price erosion period, etc. So I think the runway is very clear for at least the next 10, 15 years. So I don't think, except for these, I think cyclical blips or some economy or demand, like we're going through a blip of commodity inflation, you do have a secular growth story and runway ahead of us there. So if that's clear, then to me, that's not commanding my attention. What commands my time is that if that's clear, how do we make sure we are amongst those winners in that race there? There will be only 3 or 4 winners that will emerge from there. And Bajaj better be the ones sitting in that list of winners.
Right.
So we focus more on our product and brand strategy, and I think market is there to support us.
Right. So when you talked about winners, but this industry is reasonably competitive, and you have at least 4-5 players who are all, at least the listed ones we can see they're all looking pretty. All of them are pretty strong, good balance sheets, pretty aggressive in terms of competitive intensity, and this whole thing about unorganized to organized. I don't know how much of that journey is still left, or is that kind of pretty much done now, and it's really the big organized players who are taking it from there. What's your view on this whole competitive dynamic?
Firstly, on the unorganized organized, I think that journey is not done. I think if you look at category by category, we had to have fair shares sitting with unorganized. Okay? So I think another 3, 4, 5 years at least where that tailwind will continue in favor of the organized players. So getting that market share growth from them. And for all the right reasons. It's not, because you're serving better quality, better consumer proposition, better, products from a consumer perspective. Uh, Secondly, within these players also, clearly last 2, 3 years or 4 years has seen a lot more competitive intensity. And, it's partly because it is a low entry barrier business. It seems very attractive from the outside. But it's only when people come in that they realize that, entry barriers may be low, but success barriers are high, right?
Mhm.
And there is no shortcut to success. And that's why my comments earlier also on focus and focus on excellence here. Okay. Because entry barriers are low when you want to be a trading company, you want to buy stuff, put your tup on it, start selling it, keep doing the one thing one day, another thing the other day, etc. That's not how you build excellence. That's not how you build competitive moats, etc. I do think product R&D, innovation, proposition, very sharp brand positioning, etc., take years to build. Okay, and that's not easily replicable. And brand more than anything else it's a relationship. It's a position in the mind of a consumer. A campaign can create awareness. A campaign cannot create a relationship here. So relationships are nurtured over years and years of experience here. So I yet believe we are sitting in pole position. And when I say us, it's not us only. There may be 3, 4 companies sitting in pole position. Unless we mess it up from here, it's rightfully ours. So as long as we keep doing the right things, which to be honest, we were not doing at some point in the past, I'm not that afraid of looking at competition behind us, but more focus on the competition that is ahead of us and what is it that they have. We do have vulnerabilities or chinks in our armor that have made us weaker than them. And as we keep addressing those, I think the delta opportunity for us is greater because we're coming from behind in that sense.
Sure. Uh, in terms of companies, maybe domestic or international, is there a company or is there a couple of companies or something that you look up to and you say, yeah, this is the gold standard. This is what we want to be.
Absolutely. I'll name 2 or 3. First I'll name Levers, Hindustan Unilever. Right? And, it's a rock solid company. When I look at it, it's institutionalized. The governance, I don't mean in terms of corporate governance, but in terms of how it functions, it's nothing happens, nothing shakes that, right? People come and go at the top, and I keep saying my job is to make myself redundant. I've told the promoter my biggest legacy to you should be if I make myself redundant. Every 10 years, we should be able to change the CEO. It should not matter. That's what Lever's story is, right? But it goes back to, therefore, the institution of excellence that they've created, across everything. And for that, I'm actually right now studying, using those case studies. The Lever story didn't start now, it started in the 60s. Prakash Tandon was the first Indian chairman of Lever in the 60s, followed by Steve Thomas, I think, in the 70s, etc. And their notes, I got access to some of their notes and how they put levers together. It's very, very insightful. And that goes back to the learnings or ethos that we want to bring in here. So let me say, we're not trying to be the best in our sector. We're trying to get best practice or learnings from beyond our sector. And therefore, levers is the one example. I think FMCG companies are a great learning ground for somebody like us. So what made them them? And what is that magic potion? What is that framework? What's that talent pool? How did they create the management training program? How have they created an empowered organization? How have they created go-to-market brand sales, success, and etc. And you can start imbibing from that. So that's one company. The second company is Titan. I think that's a phenomenal success story of the last 20 years. Hardcore Indian non-MNC company. Why can't we be the Titan of our sector? In third example, closer home is our sibling cousin, which is Bajaj Auto, right?
Right.
Again, there's so many learnings from that we admire. So I think it's a bunch of companies to draw inspiration from, and then learnings, and you have to transpose those learnings. They're never a copy paste, but you have to understand what to take, how to implement, how does it fit into your context, and then try and create that. But the common thread, if you see between these 3 companies, these are companies that, the moment I take these names, they're undisputed in terms of being built on excellence and not shortcuts. They're not trading. They're not flavor of the season, and they will never be. And that's what sustainable long-term value creation is about. So that's the mindset that we are working with there.
Sure. I think that's good. I guess, I've asked a lot of questions, so I'll ask one last one and give it to Kunal. In terms of, we generate, if I look at the annual report, the first line was from the chairman was, we become debt free first time after so many years. And now that you're generating good amount of cash, in terms of capital allocation policy going forward, whether be it acquisition, be it returning to shareholder? Is there a thought process that how you've defined your whole capital allocation policy?
Sure, there is a thought. So, we've just come out from this position of becoming, debted to debt free, and therefore the fact that, we need to have a capital allocation policy is a good place to be in. I think for the next 2-3 years, we do want to build our balance sheet and capital because a company of our size scale needs to have a certain amount of capital. Is that going to be 1,000 crores, 1,500 crores, 2,000 crores? We'll start taking that finer judgment call at that point of time. But somewhere in that range is capital that should be at our disposal, that is available for anything that we choose to do, etc. From there on, clearly, we want to have a progressive capital allocation policy in terms of both. Either it has to come out and generate decent returns. We are very clear that we are fiduciary custodians of capital on behalf of shareholders, and when I say shareholders, including minority. So either need to have a cogent, value creation option for that, or then we need to have a alternative use, including dividend for that. We have also put out a dividend policy earlier this year. If I remember correct, that's about 20 to 40%, distribution. But that again, every 2-3 years, we'll review based on our total capital on a balance sheet, and probably we look at that. Yeah.
Right. But in terms of acquisition, I think you did mention that you're always, looking at opportunities if something comes through.
So,
Are you averse, would you look at even, raising debt, for example, to do a reasonably big acquisition or?
yeah, so 2-3 things. We were not so far looking. Now we started looking because, it was earlier not something you could afford or do it. Not just financially, we had too much on our plate. So any acquisition, you have to have thought through the post-acquisition game in terms of the integration, how's it going to work, do you have the management bandwidth to drive that value unlocking there too. Because whenever you acquire, you're acquiring at a premium typically, right?
That's right.
And therefore you have to be ready for the post-acquisition work to, justify the premium that you pay for it. But from a financial standpoint of view, we are far more ready and therefore open to these acquisitions right now. While we made a virtue of becoming debt-free, I'm very clear debt is not a bad word.
Right.
It was a problem for us because of the way we had, piled it on, because of reasons we had created it. But if tomorrow, we need to take on debt for tactical reasons, we will be open to doing that because, ultimately, as long as that my ROCE is higher than that, it gives me higher return on equity, my shareholder. So that's really a hypothetical opportunistic thing, but it's not a thing that we're close to if it makes sense, financial sense. Yeah.
Sure.
But the actual opportunity or actual acquisition will have to be a very opportunistic call based on what comes when at what price.
Great, Anuj. Thanks so much. Kunal, over to you. Sorry.
Kunal, you're on mute in case.
Hi, thanks, Sanjeev. Hi, Anuj. Thank you. My first question was pertaining to a very interesting comment you made on the excellence part in terms of, that is the base on which we are driving, the entire strategy. So, can you, talk us through a few, examples in terms of cultural change that you've already done or, likely to drive to achieve this? Because, like you said, culture is something that is very important pillar to all of this that you're doing, especially because you're rejuvenating the brand. We're probably trying to, rebuild, redesign the products.
So there's many facets to this, Kunal, from an org perspective. We are, a flatter organization today than we used to be. Okay. As a result of that, we are less bureaucratic and more agile or faster moving than we used to be. We are a far more egalitarian culture in terms of, look at people having far more healthier debates and brainstorming and far more empowered culture within the organization. Our talent pool today is much better. But these are individual, things. I think there's yet a lot more work to be done in terms of teamwork and how do we collaborate much better across functions. But the starting point is, do you have the right people? Have you flattened? Have you created empowerment, etc.? In that journey towards better collaboration, better interfunctional working, I think we are 50% there. I think our biggest challenge is in terms of excellence going to be now to raise that bar, right? Because I do believe, not to be sound negative, we do operate in a society that thrives on mediocrity. That's how we're conditioned, outside. Look at your roads, look at your traffic, look at your, civic sense, look at a lot of these chalta hai attitude that we thrive on in society. So in that, we're all products of that society, but how do you create a no-nonsense, pushing the envelope, culture of excellence? And that has to be cultivated over years. And there are organizations, including the ones I named, right? They've created a culture of oasis of excellence in the same, society of mediocrity. So that is, as you start doing that, in a way, I would say we're just bringing all the raw materials in place. We started that journey towards that, but it does take years and years to actually excel at excellence. Yeah. So we are on that. And when we talk excellence, and last week we had an employee session where I spoke about this, that excellence is not about some R&D guy developing an excellent product or sales guy driving, great numbers, etc. It's about everything. My receptionist, the treasury guy, the payroll guy, the supply chain guy. Everybody has to stand for excellence in his or her, the admin person, etc. Because that excellence has to become a disease. It's infectious typically. So you can't have excellence in pockets. So how does every person in his or her role stand for, am I the best? What's the benchmark that you are chasing in your role for how do you be the best? It's like a car, Formula One, right? The Schumacher, whatever, can't be excellence unless the pit stop guy, the guy, fixing the tire, the guy checking the, pressure, the guy refueling, guy doing, every guy has to, chase perfection and excellence. That's when the race is won, not because of the driver. So, that ethos is something that we're trying to really change. And the obvious ones are manufacturing excellence, TPM we're putting in them, but those are the ones that will get spoken about. But it's the small things that actually makes all the difference.
Related to this, so the pace of SKU addition and the aesthetic of the product and all will be very important part of the change in brand communication that Bajaj is likely to drive from here. So and that is one area that we have been a little slow on, historically. So how are we overcoming this in terms of, have we put in a specialized R&D team, or are we taking help from external guys to make it little more faster? So how are we approaching this?
So it's a mix of both, internal and external. Of course, we have external, whatever consultants, agencies, etc., working with us, partners. Clearly products will drive that future, and therefore this Horizon 2 is all about that. So next 2-3 years, last couple of years are going on a lot of the corporate stuff, but when I say operational excellence or focus on growth, will come on the back of product and brand, like I said, and products will be the starting point of a lot of this stuff. I do think, there's a long road to cover, but we are very focused and we have a roadmap to make that happen. Next 2-3 years, you will see a lot more. So when you have this conversation 2 years out and 3 years out, we should be in a very different position from where we are right now. But it's not, it should come every quarter. So, starting 23, every year, every quarter, you'll see some of that. You've already seen some of that if you look at the last few quarters, etc. Sorry, I lost my chain of thought. So in terms of, I'm sorry, I lost my chain of thought anyways. Yeah.
So as far
yeah,
as
the other bit I wanted to mention, when you talk about external thing, we've just launched an open innovation platform a couple of weeks ago, Innovate and Rise. I think we're the first one in our sector and possibly in the industry first one in our industry and possibly in the country to do that, because we want to create that open culture of outside in also. So we're putting in problem statements on product or proposition, etc., and attracting the best minds to actually innovate with us and create that community of open innovators and incentivizing that, etc. Because I don't think all solutions, all technology, everything can be developed in-house. So, we want to be very liberal on that, we are here to actually act as aggregators and, define those things and then convert that into IP. But we don't have to be the starting point of everything, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel on everything. So, that's a little experiment that we've done because it's not been done in India. Again, we've taken benchmarks from across the world on that. And we will, refine that from our learning as we go forward. But I think that's just a metaphor for how we want to drive our journey. So this open innovation is a strong signal for how we're trying to do things there.
Just wanted to hear your thoughts on, the sector has seen, a lot of players in the last few years trying to extend their categories and do various things. While, you mentioned that the sector has long runway for growth over the next 10-15 years, given the kind of penetration that we are having. But do you think sector is due for a consolidation? What would be your views on that?
Absolutely. So I think by 2025, you will see consolidation. Every sector goes through this. We have a lot of entrants. Then they kind of, what do you say, plateau out, and then they start falling off, right? So you've seen, I think last 2-3 years has been this entry phase. And then you'll start seeing that sustenance becomes tough. And then, I think by 25, you will start seeing the emergence of the guys who are serious here, or the big scale guys, organized, who are playing a different game versus, there'll be this bottom players, let's say private labels, etc., price warriors, whatever else it is, race to the bottom, but they'll yet survive on that. And then there'll be these leading players on the top. जो बीच में है, neither here nor there. What's your USP? What's your rise on the Ethra? What's your real proposition? You have to be somewhere. You have to stand for something, right? You can't just be another guy in that race there. So I do think by 24, 25, you will see another 2-3 years from now, you will see significant consolidation. I think what you're starting to see today is consolidation from what Sanjeev asked me, the unorganized towards organized. And the
Right.
next wave will happen within the organized also, because organized right now is yet getting the benefits of this unorganized tailwind. But next wave, you will see consolidation within organized.
Actually, Kunal, just 1 second. There's actually a question which we wanted to ask you also, and that's come through, which is on insourcing versus outsourcing. You guys have been mostly outsourcing, but some of the companies are trying to manufacture. So there are two models very clearly. One is people are getting more into manufacturing. What's your call on
So
this?
we have traditionally been more an outsourcing company. My view is slightly contrarian to what some of our leaders do, which are largely entirely in sourcing, etc. I think trading was an issue. We were also a trading company, which means we had no product exclusivity, IP, innovation, etc. So our focus is not so much to insource and manufacture everything, for financial reasons. I don't think it's necessarily the smartest ROC reason. And strategically, I don't think that's essential, which means it's not zero. We will do a certain quantum of insourcing, but I don't think we need to be manufacturing heavy. But we need to be stopped being a trading company, which we stopped. And therefore, the IP, R&D, product design, product tools and molds, etc., quality, those things are over focused on there. So I can have third-party contract manufacturers, but it's my products, my IP, my conceptual development, etc., etc. Then uska shop floor, machine, employee, shed, roof, kiski hai, doesn't matter.
Sure. Sorry. Yeah. Kunal, sorry.
Last question from my side. You mentioned about our aspiration for 1 percentage point increase in margin every year. And we have quite a bit of room if we consider the margin profile of some of the leaders. So what will be the key building blocks in terms of contributors to this margin improvement journey that we will have?
So I would say 3 or maybe 4 things. Okay, first is this product portfolio optimization. As we up our products, slightly more aspirational, right? Slightly more premium, etc., and a better mix. It's not only about ASPs or premiumization, but it's a better, more targeted, segmented product mix, etc. That's the first part here. Second is the cost side, which is COGS. Our sourcing footprint, design, negotiations, etc., etc. There's some levers sitting there, which next 2-3 years have to do. We've not had. Thanks to COVID, etc., we've not been able to actually do the work that we wanted to do on that part. Third is, operationally, you have to continue being more and more efficient. That part we've demonstrated that we are very tight on operational efficiencies, but I think there's more room there. And that related to fourth point, as operating leverage kicks in, I think that operating efficiency overheads along with operating, leverage should keep driving that. So 3-4 levers according to me: product portfolio optimization. That includes pricing power thanks to brand repositioning. Second is sourcing cost attack, which we are doing. And third is this whole operational efficiency stroke leverage.
Sure.
Anuj, the first point that you mentioned, which was premiumization, so to say, one can call it premiumization to some extent. So where are we in that journey? It's just started. Where will we see it over 3 years? How,
Yeah, so it has started. Let's take the lighting and fans example that you spoke about earlier, right? Lightings, we are largely a lamp sparer, 9 watt, 11 watt, etc. As we get into these value-added products of, battens, panels, recessed, etc., by definition, they release higher margins and better pricing products. And that's why I'm differentiating over premium. They can be at a, whatever mass positioning in that category, but that category itself was missing for us, and that subcategory was missing for us. Same way in fans, we are largely in sub-economy. As you get into economy, premium doesn't have to be the very expensive fans, etc. But those will, up your ASPs in that. Linked to that is, our innovation or proposition that we drive at the R&D or product innovation level, as well as brand, which, I think should contribute to pricing power. So today we are yet, I don't want to name specific competitors, but we yet are 50, $100 cheaper than a like-for-like product, simply because a brand doesn't have that right sheen around it. As you build that sheen, that 1-2% pricing power should also help us there.
Right. No, I think that's great. Any closing comment from your side? We've run out of time, I know.
So my only my comments is that we have a long road ahead of us. We are very, very focused on that. We're very clear what that road is. Very committed. We are hungry, aspirational, greedy, hardworking people. We see that very clearly ahead of us, and we will do it no matter what.
Great. I think Anuj, thanks a lot for spending so much time and all the very best. I think, as you said, journey has just begun, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sanjeev. Thanks, Kunal, and thanks everyone.
Thank you, Anuj, for the time. It was a pleasure hosting you.
Thank you.